I'm not here to help you be a more functional member of society. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm just here to help you understand how your mind works, what are the sources of your suffering, and how you're sometimes getting in the way of your own happiness, fulfillment, etc. Right? Psychoanalysis is not an approach to make people happy, but to make people suffer better or suffer on their own terms.
Welcome to Therapy for the World, an interview series exploring the personal stories of people working across the spectrum of self-care and world care. I'm Dan Sikorsky, a writing teacher and therapist, and the other voice you hear is María Verónica Laguna, a licensed clinical social worker, clinical supervisor, and psychoanalytic psychotherapist in private practice in Uruguay. María spent over a decade working in New York City, where she taught social work at Mercy University and served as an instructor at the Metropolitan Institute for Training in Psychoanalytic Psychotherapy. She's also the co-author of From Grad School to Private Practice, a roadmap for mental health clinicians, and has forthcoming chapters on immigrants' self-states and critical psychology. Her work spans continents and disciplines. She founded the Bicultural Collective to support bicultural individuals and the clinicians who serve them, and she leads Psychoanalysis and Social Justice, a collaborative database curating events and resources at the intersection of clinical practice and activism. She also explores the intersection of music and mental health, facilitating workshops on tango's therapeutic power and on learning Spanish through Latin American protest songs. I first met María through that protest songs group, and then discovered we share other interests: psychoanalysis, social work, and the experience of migration from the Southern Cone to the United States and back again. She's warm, good-hearted, and passionate, and it was a joy to connect with her for what I hope is the first of many conversations. We recorded this just past noon on Saturday, August 9th, 2025. Here's our conversation. María, so happy to be here with you. We're just a little bit of a river away right now. You're in Montevideo and I'm in Buenos Aires. I want to start this off by asking you, as we tend to here, if you can point to an experience, something, a person, anything in your childhood, early life that you feel helped shape the person you are today.
Wow, that's a great question. I feel like the answer to it explains so much about myself, my career. Have you seen the movie Matilda?
Of course.
Okay, well, I am like Matilda in the sense that, my teachers and my friends saved me after having been raised in an abusive household. And it was through that inspiration, that support, my love for reading, my love for music that really shaped me and gave me the resilience to be the person that I am. And that's how I found a whole world of passions around music, literature, etc. So I would say the teachers in my life have been crucial for me.
Did they see you as someone who was struggling, or did you have to announce and say, hey, I need
They
help?
did. I think they did. Yes, yes, yes. I was raised in a small town where everyone knew each other. I was the shy girl, but I was always, reading, in the corner with a book. But not in a sense of like social isolation. That's I think that a big of my strengths, right? That I was able to handle a lot of traumas through my passions about again music, literature, and connections with teachers. Yes, and actually that's why I became a teacher myself. Like the Miss Honeys of my life, right? It was the name of the teacher, Miss Honey.
I think so.
I became one. So that's how deep it goes. My relationship with those figures.
Early on, you also chose the path of psychology. How did you end up choosing to study that at university in Uruguay?
Uh, my parents had like a bodega, or I don't know what, like a convenience store, and we would live behind it. And I would notice from early on that customers had such need to talk about their lives. This deep, deep, deep need to be listened to. And that's always fascinated me as a little girl. And I think I'd also connected with my need to be listened to. And then I thought, oh my God, this is fascinating. I wonder if there's a profession or people who just listen. I mean, there's a need there. And I noticed that very early on. And, then with my relationship with my teachers in high school, even in primary school, they all saw that in me. And you're a good listener. You have interesting questions to ask. And it was through that reflection over the years that I thought, okay, maybe I can do that. And then I read Freud. I think I came across interpretation of dreams. I've always been a dreamer. I've always been someone who remembers my dreams. And, I just thought, okay, this is what I want to do. So I knew I wanted to be a therapist ever since I was maybe 12, 13.
What clarity.
Yes, yes, yes.
I like the image you paint of the bodega of
Uh-huh.
I think I see that often too. People coming in and chatting with the owner or with each other, less so, but with the owner. Would
Yes.
someone attend to their need to be listened to, or would they just kind of speak into the vacío, into the emptiness?
Exactly, to the void. Yes, yes, yes. And such deep, profound, and intimate level, right? So I remember that as a child, I was like, oh, this is pretty unique. So yes, and then I realized, oh, well, there's actually a profession that is called psychology that facilitates this.
Beautiful. And you mentioned finding Freud early on. How did
Yes.
you build your orientation over the course of your years studying psychology?
Well, that's a great question. I wouldn't say build it. In Uruguay, when we think of psychology, um, and this is shocking for my U.S. friends and colleagues, it's almost like a synonym of psychoanalysis. In Uruguay, I mean, we read Freud from day one. Other orientations that we do cover, like CBT or more like focal therapy, we regard them as more foreign. Psychoanalysis is so embedded in our society that, people in jail do psychoanalysis, people in psychiatric hospitals, in public schools. I would say it's embedded in the very fabric of society, even the daily language. We talk about, oh, your unconscious betrayed you, or oh, that was a slip of tongue, right? This sort of language, it's very much embedded. Um, and honestly, I thought myself, walking into a psychology university, that psychology and psychoanalysis were one and the same. And then I realized, oh no, there's a whole other world. So in a way, my experience has been kind of like the negative of the experience of many people in other countries where psychoanalysis maybe is not the main, the go-to. So that's been a very interesting process. We're going from, oh, this is the standard, this is the norm, and then realizing, well, no, it's actually very contextual.
It's a question that's been asked before, why psychoanalysis has such traction in this area of the world. And I haven't heard an answer that's yet fully convinced me, but I wanted to put the question on the table. Why do you think it's like the way of doing psychology, of attending to suffering and of attending to community?
Well, I first of all, I agree with you that I haven't found any one answer that feels the right fit. But I think a big part of it has to do with precisely immigration, which is one of the topics that I love the most, and the influx of exiles, or psychoanalysts fleeing Nazi regimes. But I think also, um, I think it has to do with this culture of surviving instead of how do I explain it? I think Southern Cone, I don't want to speak to South America as a whole because I haven't been in every single country, but I think there's an element of precarious forms of living that force people to live with uncertainty, paradoxes, a lot of things that are very psychoanalytically aligned, right? Psychoanalysis is not the art of being happy. It's more about getting to know ourselves, but also sitting with discomfort. And the unknown, right? So the idea that we all have an unconscious that we're not fully in control of, I think it's something that it's deeply embedded in the way we are, and that is already taught from early on in implicit ways. And I think there's, in other cultures that are more pragmatic, more consumerist, more individualistic, they don't place so much emphasis on attachment or, again, unconscious or death drives, right? So I think the history of colonial violence, we know very well in our bones the impact of violence, the impact of displacement, the way that filters into our unconscious. And even though we may not use unconscious, the word unconscious in our daily lives, I think we are all very much shaped by it. I also think the history of dictatorships in the Southern Cone and the collective trauma that it has created, the way history is repeated, right? That's something very psychoanalytic, I would say. So I think it very much aligns with the profession here.
Seems like you were very in touch growing up and also while studying with the specific forms of suffering or the specific issues and specific sources of trauma in in your geographic space. As someone who's also, moved around and considered practicing psychology in different parts of the world, what was it like for you to move to the States and encounter a whole different gamut of social stressors and situations?
Well, it was a whole new world because I left Uruguay right after I graduated, actually, here in Uruguay. So basically, my clinical practice in Uruguay up until now has been only as an intern. I did my internship in a psychiatric hospital called Hospital Vilar de Bo, which is like Hospital Borda in Argentina. People are living there under very precarious conditions. Many of those who have no family, who were admitted once, and nobody else asked if they're even alive. So a big part of my job was to be with these patients or clients, whatever word. Um, and so my only experience here was working with folks institutionalized with severe mental illness. My first time working with other populations was actually in the US.
Hmm.
Um, I started with working with homeless population as a social worker, and then I transitioned as a therapist. And the experience has been incredibly enriching and humbling. This idea that whatever we thought we knew about people, there's so much more. I mean, just the experience of going from a small town in Uruguay where everyone knows each other to New York, that in and of itself, it's such a revolution, an internal revolution. And I could go on and on describing what that experience was for me, but I would say it was hard, a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of, okay, you don't belong here. But then, finding my way. And being in a city that there are so many immigrants, it became sort of like an accidental niche of mine. Once I started my private practice, most of the people that came to seek my services were immigrants or children of immigrants. So in a way, my experience there was very different from my experience here.
The word alterity is coming to mind for me. Like, being other somehow in a space.
Yes,
I think it's
yes,
such a formative experience to have gone through. Whether it was moving from
absolutely.
your small town to the big city or moving to another country, I think people are drawn to that. It must be like something that occurs, in the clinic, like drawn to the acquaintance with difference, the acquaintance with
Yes,
different ways of being, with
yes.
non-duality, but also like the paradoxes that you were mentioning earlier too.
Yeah, yeah. And that encounter with alterity can lead to healthy curiosity, but it can also lead to othering, right? And one thing that I've always been very sensitized as someone that has been othered in many spaces is what happens when that experience of being othered is not examined. what happens when we don't have a space to process that otherness? And a big one, which, I've experienced myself, is precisely imposter syndrome as a form of internalized othering, even as a form of internalized colonialism, right? The idea that, oh, we don't belong, right? So, and, seeing firsthand how people relate to that othering as a way of solving their psychic conflicts. And sometimes it leads to even more othering, or even worse, people who have been marginalized, internalizing that or identifying with the aggressor. And think, okay,
Yeah.
I think what a lot of my patients ask me, like, Maria, how do you explain Latinos voting for Trump? Right. And that is a way of relating with otherness. I don't want to be other. I'm the one who others, right? If I take on the role of the aggressor, then I don't have to worry about being othered. And not have catastrophic consequences, right? And we're seeing them right now.
Relating to otherness is a really lovely way of putting that as a dynamic relationship that can go one
Yes.
of many, like in many ways.
Yes. And not only in terms of immigration, but also gender, sexuality, right? That's something that also I find fascinating how, and I wrote about it, how gender, sexual expression, personality, class can change from a pre-migration identity to a post-migration identity, right? People that all of a sudden come from countries where homosexuality is criminalized, and then they move to a place where it's not, and then they find themselves realizing, oh, wait a second, this may be resonating more with my experience, but I never even thought about it because it was criminalized. And sometimes people can react to that realization by embracing that or by rejecting it even more and going to the other side of, homophobia and internalized homophobia.
Pretty early on, you found a link in psychology, psychoanalysis, and many of the social issues that we're talking about, uh, championing change and dynamics that are more emancipatory than they are constraining for populations, dynamics that make things possible instead of limiting experiences. Where did that connection, we were speaking off the air about how that connection was sort of like always there for you, right?
Yes.
How is that so?
I think my experience in Villar de Bo Hospital was incredibly transformative because those are the people who society completely forgot about. And for American psychoanalysis, it would be the non-analyzable patients, the ones that are very concrete, very primitive. And that's something that always pissed me off so much after moving from Uruguay, having done good work, having seen colleagues doing great analytic work, and then going to New York and listening from sometimes my own teachers. I don't know, that patient is too difficult, too complicated, too concrete, too primitive. And
For
after
what, right? For what? Too complicated for what?
right, exactly. And placing that difficulty of engaging in the patient, right? The resistant patient, the difficult patient. Well, what about the relationship? Maybe there's something in the therapist that it's making the person difficult to engage because they're not opening up because, whatever. So I think it was by working with extremely vulnerable populations that early on I had that sense of, okay, yes, psychoanalysis can really be a motor for change and in order for that to happen, it has to be thought of outside of the clinical room. I mean, it's beyond the analytic couch. And I think that's something that in the States, sadly, a lot of people still think about psychoanalysis. The pure psychoanalysis, it has to be on the analytic couch. And I don't think that's true. I think that's another form of othering, actually.
How is that the case? Othering?
Well, I found that a lot of colleagues who talk about, this is pure analytic work and those who divide analytic patients versus non-analyzable patients, many of them are the same ones that say, well, we should not be thinking about social stuff. Psychoanalysis should not bother with thinking about social issues. And that idea always, I found it so jarring. How can we even separate them? The personal is political. And there's, to this day, 2025, a lot of arguments in listservs and groups about, oh no, this is too social. We shouldn't be talking about violence, about genocide, about systemic issues. That's for other people.
Where else can it go then, if beyond the couch, right? Where else should psychoanalysis be?
There's a wonderful documentary that I highly recommend called Psychoanalysis in the Barrios that talks about psychoanalysis in Harlem and in non-traditional settings. Even though traditional, it's at least it's an official discourse, right? I don't think it's a non-traditional setting. What is not traditional for them is traditional for me, right? Uh, and one of the therapists that it's interviewed, I don't remember which one, she talked about psychoanalysis as a sensibility, not only as a theory or a practice, but a sensibility. And that concept really blew my mind because I truly believe that a psychoanalytic sensibility can be transferred to many aspects of our lives, to organizations, to the way managers handle staff conflict, any group dynamics, education, right? To be sensitized to this almost like a narcissistic injury, like Freud saying that we do have an unconscious and that there's part of ourselves that we're not aware of and that we're not in control of. And to fully embrace that and to be curious about our own minds, right? I think psychoanalysis allows us to be curious and normalizes that it's okay to be curious, and that it's necessary. And I think that spirit of curiosity, of surrendering complete control, that's something that we can all collectively benefit from. Of course, psychoanalysis has their limitations as a practice and as a theory. But when I think about psychoanalysis as a sensibility, that's when it becomes more general or more, easily transferred to other domains.
Did you find yourself needing to defend psychoanalysis a lot when you moved to the States?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And of all places, where I had to defend it the most, and this is so shocking to me, in social work school. Because and that helped me so much to learn about how psychoanalysis is seen in the United States, which is very different from here. My classmates would be like, Maria, where are you gonna work after you finish your master? And I said, oh, I want to be a psychoanalyst or a psychoanalytic therapy. Oh, so you want to work with the worried well? And I would go, what do you mean? I mean, I come from a country where I was working with the most vulnerable people doing psychoanalysis, so I don't understand this. And then my classmates taught me that psychoanalysis in the US has historically been, focused on, more privileged people, which is completely different from how we do psychoanalysis in South America. So as I found myself defending psychoanalysis there, I thought, wait a second, I'm going to stop defending it and understanding more from my colleagues. Why is that? Why is that accusation? Why are they talking about psychoanalysis as something elitist, something, again, for the worried well? And that's really, well, that's because a lot of practitioners created that, right? So then I stopped defending psychoanalysis and I started criticizing it more.
Mm, beautiful. You joined the assault. No, I'm kidding. Well, it's the assault on a traditional
A little
type.
bit, yes, yes, just a little bit. Yes, yes,
When these friends or these colleagues would say, it's just for the worried well, I think the argument is building counterexamples, right? Like, no, you can also work with X with
yes.
psychoanalysis.
Something that I've heard a lot is this idea of where else do I have 45 minutes just for myself when I don't have to worry about the well-being of the therapist, where I don't have to worry about offending, where I can bring my rage, my sadness, my inappropriateness without being controlled, without being told what to do, right? Another thing that it's a huge difference, has been a huge difference in terms of psychoanalysis here and there. In Uruguay, we started reading Michel Foucault and dynamics of power and control from early on. I had never read a single word of Michel Foucault in none of my psychoanalytic training. It's always only psychoanalysts, not philosophers, not and you know, patients that come from extremely marginalized places, they're the ones that are more subject to control, right? What they need to do to keep their housing, to keep their food stamps, when they go to the doctor, right? What they have to do to keep their benefits, and I hate that they call it like that, benefits, when it's basic needs. It's like when it's a relief from that. It's like, okay, here I'm not here to help you be a more functional member of society. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm just here to help you understand how your mind works, what are the sources of your suffering, and how you're sometimes getting in the way of your own happiness, fulfillment, etc. Right? Psychoanalysis is not an approach to make people happy, but to make people suffer better or suffer on their own terms, like Adam Phillips said.
It's beautiful. It is hard to defend psychoanalysis in a very evidence-based world that like seeks
Yes.
to quantify, and it seeks to understand particularly like what is going to happen in each session and what is the treatment plan for this patient and so on. But I love the words that you bring up about sensibility. I mean, I find myself even in Monositis now, sure, training is mostly still psychoanalytic, but you do have a lot of professors forming a new wave of an approach that's very contrary to it, right? Then that really tries to push psychoanalysis under the rug and to propose that it's not working and that it's an old-fashioned way. I had a professor the other day say that psychoanalysis is great for a philosophy class, he said, you know, or it's great for a literature class. And those of us who ascribe to some of its beliefs are just sitting there in class feeling a little bit powerless to debate this man. But yeah, you do encounter some of that. In any case, the principles that you bring up are, I think, foundational for how one relates to oneself and to others, and in a space with other people, certainly. You created a resource at one point, and I wonder at which point that was, a database on psychoanalysis and social justice. I understand it as an approach to bringing something else to the psychoanalytic table in the States.
Yes.
Where was
Yes.
that project born?
It was thanks to George Floyd, actually. After the murder of George Floyd, there were a lot of conversations online. You know, the pandemic hit. Later, there were riots. A lot was going on, and I really wanted to engage colleagues or be part of conversations around that and what we can do. And that's when I started to hear more of like, no, we shouldn't go there. So suggested, let's leave that to others. And around that time, I started doing more research and learning from other colleagues that, just like me, were more aligned with, no, psychoanalysis can really offer something to think about social problems. Because that's how it started, actually. And seeing that division and that accusation of, oh, well, psychoanalysis cannot help social problems, it was sort of like my response to that. Like, no, there's a lot. And there's a lot that we're not taught in formal education and formal circles. I also started seeing there's so many events going on online because of the pandemic that I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I need to put it all in one place. And I actually did it for personal reasons, sort of like, okay, instead of having a folder in my Google Drive, I want to share it with other people. And I started teaching, so it was also a way of, exchanging information. And actually it led to wonderful opportunities. People from Germany, it has subscribers from all over the world. People from Germany found it, of an institute that sadly no longer exists, called Skill Point. And they were like, oh my God, this is amazing. And this is pretty rare. And I thought, well, it shouldn't be rare. And thanks to the website, I got the opportunity to teach about critical psychology for a year because of that, because of my passion to rebridging a bridge that should have never been broken. So that's how it came up. And I'm constantly searching. I subscribe to so many newsletters. So I tell people, if you have any event or anything, please send it my way. And now I'm telling your audience too. Any event, book, article that you think it's aligned with psychoanalysis and social justice, feel free to send it my way, and I'll put it on the database.
One of the terms that you use is critical psychology. Another is emancipatory psychoanalysis. Are they one and the same, and how do you understand those terms?
I think critical psychology would lead to emancipation or lead to ways in which we can achieve that. I don't think it's an end product, but more like a constant process. We're always trying to emancipate. I don't think while we're embedded in a neoliberal capitalist society, I don't think there's such a thing as complete emancipation, but it's always something to strive towards. The big question is emancipating from what, right? So critical psychology, I'm very interested in the works of Ian Parker and Derek Hook, who basically they shed light on the importance of being self-critical, right? And the way psychology can cause harm as well, right? Not that long ago, homosexuality was part of the DSM. There's a history of psychologists being complicit with dictatorships and, Guantanamo and, in South America as well. So critical psychology as a practice of constantly questioning ourselves, never assuming that we have an end solution to things, understanding the internalized colonialism, the internal fascist that we'll have inside, the most undesired or shameful aspects of ourselves that we carry into our work, and constantly revisiting them.
Who do you lean on theoretically to provide intellectual community around these issues, right? You've mentioned a couple authors, but who would you point to as authors, theorists who have been good company for you?
Well, Elizabeth Danto, she's a historian, and she wrote a wonderful book about Freud's free clinics and the history of psychoanalysis in class. So I think she has been a great source. Daniel Gastambide, who just I think publishes his second book or third book about decolonial psychoanalysis, also a great source of inspiration. Avgi Saketopoulou, also, who based in New York, she's from Greece, has done amazing work about emancipation in terms of sexual practices and forms of being. Ian Parker from the Red Clinic. Actually, everything the Red Clinic does, I think it's amazing. Gloria Sandua. Well, now I'm going to name other adjacent authors that are not psychoanalysts per se. Gloria Sandua, Chicana activist, poet, writer. Michel Foucault, who talked and sensitized us to the role of power and control. Deleuze and Guattari. There's so many.
Yeah.
But I would say those are the ones that I keep in my mind and I have internal dialogues with. And Sander Ferenczi, definitely.
Okay. That last name that you mentioned is one that you're often in dialogue with in
Yes.
papers. What attracted you to his work?
Well, I think I identify with him a lot in the sense that he was the one that worked with the patients that nobody else wanted to work with. Actually, Freud, he studied with Freud, and he's one of the dissidents, right, along with Jung and others. So I always like that rebellious attitude of, wait a second, Freud, we need to question our own hypocrisy, right? If the patient is doing something that we don't understand, it's not that they're projecting, maybe that we are failing. So that intellectual honesty always moved me, and that's something that I always strive to. He was the first to work with transgender patients. He worked with so many people that other colleagues did not want to work with because they were too difficult. And that's how I started my career, working with those who are too difficult. Which I think in and of itself, it's a statement, right? It's like, no, there's a wonderful quote by Patricia Shiravici, who's Argentinian, that says, even the poor can afford an unconscious, right? And that, I think that's the perfect answer to who can benefit from psychoanalysis? Anyone who has an unconscious. And I think Ferenczi, she got that very, very clear. His work on identification with the aggressor, I think it's so relevant, especially to understand what's going on geopolitically, right? Groups hating each other and taking on the role of the aggressor after they've been traumatized collectively. Yeah, so he's someone that I feel very close with, that I also studied in Uruguay, but rarely heard mentioned in my training in New York. Last year, no, 2 years ago, there was a conference in Budapest for his 150th birthday, and I went and I presented on Ferenczi, how he's a critical psychologist and the connection between both. And I got to meet wonderful people from all over the world, and we remain connected. And we keep thinking together about Ferenczi in the present, the importance of his work, and how he was ostracized by the analytic community, in part because he was questioning it and because he was more democratic. He truly believed that anyone could benefit from it if they wanted to. And that's something that Freud was not always in agreement with.
You
Also,
mentioned
the role of transference too, right? We know that initially Freud was like, no, what's this thing, Dora? What is the thing of erotic transference? No. And Ferenczi embraced that.
there's almost the rebellion, but also the embrace of the difficult things
Yes.
internally and externally too.
Yes.
Seems
And of
appealing.
course, Ferenczi, he went too experimental, right? He tried mutual analysis, which failed miserably, where he would analyze the patient and the patient would analyze him. And even though it failed, I think it was an exercise of, disturbing power dynamics and trying to make things a little bit more horizontal. And even though it failed, I think it came from a good place.
You were mentioning geopolitical dynamics currently today and how, all those years ago when you started working with people, you were saying whether it's patients, clients, it's a beautiful debate. And one term that's being used right now here in Argentina is users. Well, it's specifically of health systems, right? A user of the health system, usuario. It's a nice one
Usuario.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Or even consumer.
Oh, that's a
Do
big
they
one.
use consumidor?
I have not heard that one. I'm not sure how comfortable I am with that one.
I don't like it.
Okay. I wonder what it's looked like in your clinic these days to receive people affected uh, directly or indirectly by the geopolitical situation currently in the States, specifically around immigration, but obviously going beyond that too. What are you noticing in the clinic?
Um, well, I think it depends on the population. I want to separate from like immigrants and children of immigrants. And a lot of things that I hear from children of immigrants, people from children of Cubans, for example, like, well, why did my parents do all this hard work to bring their lives to the United States, and now I want to leave? Like, why did you do that? Why did you leave? And there's this desire of understanding more of history, the historical circumstances that led to their parents' immigration, and how sometimes the parents who experience a lot of the things that are happening now, dictatorships, violence, persecution, the parents are so traumatized that they don't want to remember. They can't. They don't have what their children need to support themselves. Like, Let me rephrase it. I don't want to give any specific examples to identify anyone accidentally, but this idea of I want to know more about my parents' story, where they were from, why they came to the United States, to understand the current situation. Um, and they don't have any answers because, again, the parents are not able to. They can't. Or, um, you know, I have a lot of adult kids of immigrants who are very conservative and who are anti other immigrants, right? um, and helping them navigate that dynamic and what happened. Why were my parents so um, you know open to different ideas and different people, and then they were traumatized in the U.S. and then again the pendulum swing to rejecting the other, identifying with the aggressor. So I've been having a lot of conversations around that and the ambivalence. Like, okay, I'm mad at my parents for saying that, for supporting Trump or Bolsonaro or Milei, but I also understand why they may be compelled to do that. And what do I do with that? Right? It's very, very difficult conversation. It's very painful too.
And no clear answers either. I
No?
resonated with the piece you mentioned about, the child of immigrants observing in their parent this desire, at least erstwhile desire, to fervently move to the States and be in this great beacon, this great, wonderful place. And the feeling currently in 2025 that it's so far from that, that it's not this great, wonderful place. It creates a really just uncomfortable situation internally and also definitely in dialogue with parents. uh, you know, I don't think this place is as wonderful as you do, or I'm not objectively seeing it to be a wonderful place.
Right. But then the parents may respond, and in many cases, rightfully so, but you don't know what I've been through, right? I've been through civil war. I've been sexually abused. I've been, living in poverty, and now I'm not. So that's also important to see both sides of it and sit with that ambivalence. A part of me is angry at my parents for having brought me here or for having come here, and another part is very grateful and understanding.
You used the term dislocation recently to refer to part of what is occurring in these dialogues.
Mhm.
Why do you choose that term, and what does it refer to?
Um, this location, it was inspired by reading Greenberg and Greenberg, who were an Argentinian couple analysts. They are like the first psychoanalysts that really talked about immigration per se from a psychoanalytic perspective. And one of the things that they said, how immigration is inherently traumatic because it involves a loss of continuity. And in terms of what I am not the same person I used to be. I'm not in the same place where I used to be, either physically, emotionally. I'm dislocated. The location that I had that gave me a sense of who I am, where I come from, it's interrupted in the process of immigration. So the person is not only dislocated geographically, but also mentally. The social world that used to mirror back to me who I was, my language, my routine, everything that makes me feel located, tethered, embedded in the world is gone, even under the most ideal immigration circumstances, right? And that's something that also fascinates me, that among folks who have a lot of privileges, either based on gender, race, social class, they never think about the struggles of immigration because oh, I'm not undocumented, I'm white, I'm not worried, but the dislocation is still there. It's a loss.
A term that I used to sit with so much so many years ago. I don't identify with it as strongly now, but I remember how strong the attachment was to it those years ago was the word unanchored, to be
Yeah.
unanchored. in the world,
Yes. Yes.
and I see some a resonance with the word dislocation. That
Yes.
and it has the ambivalence of it too, right? On the one hand, what ship wants to be anchored forever? And on the other
Exactly.
hand, what ship wants to never reach its destination?
Exactly. And yes, and that's a fascinating interplay of ideas, right? That we belong and we don't belong at the same time. The same way that, a ship cannot be constantly anchored or away at the same time. Yes. Yes.
And one must be dislocated to relocate, perhaps, or to, you could have been mislocated for a
Yes.
while.
Yes. 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 Exactly. Yes.
So one domain that we haven't talked a lot about yet, but you alluded to it earlier when you mentioned one of the forces that was uh, rescuing for you in childhood, and that's music. How did you first come to appreciate and find solace in that?
I mean, from early on, I think I would be like probably 3, 4 years old. I found myself so moved with music to the point of tears. And I was so little that I wouldn't understand why I was so moved. But wait a second, I'm not sad. Why am I crying? Um, and I don't know. Maybe I may have some musician ancestors. I don't know, but from very, very, very early on, I was very sensitive. And it's not that I was raised by musicians or any of the people close to me growing up was nothing like that. I think I was so alone that music gave me a language to speak and to feel understood before I started school. And that's when I developed my social group, my chosen family of friends and teachers. I think music was the first, well, the lullaby idea, right? The soothing element of it. Um, yeah. But also, I mean, the lyrics. Um, Actually, the reason why I learned English, I didn't learn English in the US. I already spoke English. I started at 12 in taking private classes because I wanted to know what the Beatles were singing. I told my brother, I want, and my brother, okay, we can take you to one class. You can choose, ballet or this or that. I was like, I want to speak English because
Yeah.
I want to know what the Spice Girls are singing. That's where the Spice Girls were the my favorite band as a teenager, and I remember being that incredibly empowering and accessing a whole new world that opened up for me.
To this day, you still have a lot of, tight links with the music world, even within the
Yes,
world of healing and therapy and psychology.
yes,
You work with tango and with protest songs, right? As in different ways.
yes.
Where did that relationship with tango come from, and what do you do with that right now?
Well, Astor Piazzolla is one of my favorite musicians ever. Again, he's one that even as an adult, it makes me cry of, it's just so moving, his music. And I think a big part of it is because it's immigration history. There's some melancholic sadness that it's so embedded in tango, right? Tango was created. I mean, most Argentinians would cancel me for this, but tango was actually, it came from African slaves. Tango has black roots. And one European did bring the bandoneon to South America, and that's how tango was implemented with the bandoneon. But in reality, it is not a white European thing. It's actually brought from the nostalgia of the slaves that miss their home country. That's part of what fueled tango. So all that sadness turned into so much beauty and something that will connect people, that make them dance. Uh, that's something that always fascinated me. When I was in New York, missing Uruguay, missing Argentina, um, I got to tango as a source of comfort. And then I approached the tango community. I made a lot of friends in the tango community, people that I could speak Spanish with, something that I really missed and needed, and share my passion for music. Some helped me, some asked me to collaborate either by, lyrics or give me opinion. I'm a music nerd. I spent a long time listening to music, collecting records, doing research around that. So I think tango, it's the nostalgia of the immigrant, but also the dance part. And that's what informed the event that I did at the New York Public Library, the healing power of tango. I realized that tango was very healing for me as an individual person. And then I started doing more research about what tango can do for people. I met a few tango teachers who were working in health homes with the elderly. And they shared wonderful stories about the power of that in terms of connecting. And then I went to an event. I think it was someone presenting I think it was her master's thesis that is called Dancing with the Locos, Dancing with the Crazies. And it was a psychoanalyst who went to Argentina to study how people in a psychiatric hospital had a tango workshop and how incredibly healing it was for them. And then I started learning, like, what do people do? And I try to study the different angles from which tango can be healing, not only in terms of the physical aspect, like balance and, exercise, but also the language of the body, the embrace, right? The intimacy that tango involves dancing very closely with a person that might be a stranger and then releasing that. So the in dynamics of intimacy, closeness, separation, very different from what life is in the United States. That really attracted me, that really seduced me. So I started doing interviews, talking to people, going to milongas, taking tango lessons myself. And I thought, oh my God, this connects on so many points. As an immigrant, as, someone who works with pain, with closeness, with, in the dyadic element, the leader, the follower, taking turns around that. Anyway, I get very passionate, as you can tell. So I did an event in the New York Public Library. A lot of people attended. I brought a professional tango dancing couple. So it was a mix of talking about tango and watching them dance. It was beautiful.
That is really beautiful. And I liked your inclusion of how tango can be queered too.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
How it
yes.
can disrupt that follower and leader dynamic and turn it on its head.
Absolutely. And another thing I want to add in terms of my relationship with music, I had a lot of musician patients and also tango dancer patients. And they've been such wonderful teachers in terms of letting me know how helpful it's been for them.
What is a milonga in New York City like? I mean, I know what they're like here in Buenos Aires, and they're breathtaking to watch. And I've participated less than I've watched, but they are just surreal. What are they like in New York?
Same. I mean, talk about this location. Sometimes it feels like an island. Like, am I in New York? Where am I? This just feels like out of a movie. There's a live band. There's people from all ages. People say, "Oh, tango es algo de viejos." Not really. Historically, yes, people say, "Oh, tango, that's what my grandmother listened to in the radio." But I think it's changing. The diversity of people, that's something beautiful that now that I'm in Uruguay, I miss. I haven't been to a milonga here yet, but I'm not going to find people from all over the world. I'm not going to see a Japanese dancing with a German. We're only 3 million people. The diversity here is not the same. I'm not, or I don't know, people not speaking Spanish, but singing their songs perfectly because they love them so much. Something that can really, get people together from all cultures and ages and walks of life in a time where the other person's presence can be so threatening. So the milonga is the one place where all of that goes away. And I feel that's magical, actually.
Yeah, reconfigure your relationship or have a corrective emotional experience. We could even say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
One of the things that attracted me so much to the work that you're doing and to your person is the spirit that you seem to bring to your engagements right now. You're doing from my vantage point, it looks like you're doing a million things, and they sure seem to all have a central thread, though, and a a spirit animating them. One of the
Mm,
words that we were talking about earlier is anger. And though you're smiling and though you're enthusiastic, I know that there's a lot of that in you too, from what we've been talking about.
absolutely.
Where are you placing your anger these days? And what did you mean earlier when you were saying that anger can be misplaced?
Great question. And I think it all ties together. When you said spirit, one of the words that my teachers and students and supervisees have repeated over and over that keeps coming up in evaluations and comments and feedback is passion. Maria is so passionate, the way she talks, the way she works. And I think that is true. And I do think that a big part of that passion is connected to anger and rage. As someone that has been traumatized herself and worked with traumatized people all the time, have seen firsthand how rage can be and is an energy like electricity, and just like electricity, it can give us wonderful things like internet, but it can also cause fires and destruction. And anger being demonized, it's a disservice to all of us. And I learned that early on. And in learning about the civil rights movements in the US and here, how rage and anger was the fuel for social change, right? So harnessing that anger can be a catalyst for change, but if placed in the wrong way, it can be turned to the self. And that may look like self-hatred, internalized homophobia, internalized sexism, racism, you name it. Or it can be turned against the other and completely disavowed from yourself. And I think there's a third way where we don't have to put the anger in ourselves or others, but we can turn that into fuel to change things, right? I think anger, it's the part of us that I mean, it has a biological function, right? And it's a part of us that signals that an injustice has happened, that something shouldn't happen this way. And that prompts us to move, to do something about it. And, I work a lot with survivors of sexual abuse who could never get angry, especially because sometimes the people who abuse them were people they loved. So what do they do with that anger? It's me, I'm bad. And again, that has catastrophic consequences for that child that grows up into an adult that thinks they're bad, right? Because at the end of the day, if you grow up thinking that you're bad, you won't. And if you think that people expect you to be bad, you're going to be bad because that's all expected from you. And part of what I do in my work with people is to, whenever they bring anger as something that they shouldn't be feeling, first of all, I ask them to get curious over why do you think you're angry in the first place? Oh, no, it doesn't matter. I shouldn't be angry. Well, but you are. Why don't we talk about that instead, right? And I feel like it's kind of a taboo in so many circles too. Um, and that's a problem. Like, for example, parents angry at their kids, or, we have Winnicott talking about, hating the counter-transference and moms sometimes hating their babies. And it's like, how can you hate your baby? Well, we need to open up spaces for hatred, for anger, for all these tabooized emotions that, can turn into actually something good. One of the songs that I wanted to bring to the social justice learn Spanish thing, it's called La Marcha de la Bronca, the March of Rage, that talks about the dictatorship in Argentina and, how people were angry that they couldn't be free. So I think that anger is what can prompt us, if well used, to get out of bad situations.
Sounds like an invitation into passion too. I think that in any point that you'd say to someone, no, actually, do get angry. In fact, right now, let that out. What if
Yeah.
not passion is what emerges from that, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, I think of Greta Thunberg, right? That, when Trump said, oh, she's an angry woman, and she said, yeah, I am. And she took that with pride. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Again, as long as you use it well. Just like fire, right? Fire can destroy or can create.
Fire can destroy or it can create. I'm going to sit with that. Thank you so much for your time
You're
today.
welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to talk with you. I think that there are more doors we can still yet open in the future. But anyway, I'm really glad to connect with you. It's just so nearby and so available for dialogue around so many important issues.
Yes, and also I love the fact that, I mean, we're both Latinos speaking English, hoping to reach other people. I mean, that's fantastic. Talk about different ways of being and in-betweenness.
Totally. Yes, I'm gonna stop myself because I'm gonna open more doors. Un
Thank
placer,
you so
María.
much. Igualmente. Chao, chao.
Thanks for being here. If this conversation resonated with you, consider reviewing Therapy for the World or sharing the link with someone who might appreciate it. Until next time, speak with care and listen deeply.